So what do you believe the U.S. military is about to do to southern Vancouver Island?
U.S. Navy plans on putting multiple transmitters on mountains along the Olympic Peninsula coast that will be sending off massive amounts of radiation. They want to test to find out how to cut off their enemies' communication, navigation, and any sort of military communications.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. My guest is Sharon Noble, Director of the Coalition to Stop Smart Meters in BC. Sharon, one of your recent news releases said that the Utilities Commission in BC is going to take a look at that onerous fee that's charged to people who want to keep their analog meters. Can you tell us about that?
No, I don't believe I said that.
Oh, okay. Well, what did you say?
What I said was I sent a letter. I've sent several letters to Bill Bennett, to the BCUC, to everybody, saying that the fees that we are being charged are discriminatory. And I have yet to receive an acknowledgement from anybody in either party. Now, Jim, the way I figure that this is discriminatory is that under the Meter Choices program, people with legacy meters, analogs or digitals that are not smart meters, have to pay $32.40 a month. Whether our meter is read or not, we get charged. People, especially who are on equal payments, who pay equal payments throughout the year, are really being taken advantage of. Their meters will only be read once or twice a year, and they still have to pay this $32.40 a month. If you remember correctly, last year when this started, when we were granted this opt-out under the Meter Choices, Bill Bennett ordered the BC Utilities Commission to charge a fee sufficient to pay for the additional service required to read our meters. The implication was clear that smart meters were all being read remotely, that only the analogs and legacy meters needed to be read manually. This isn't true. I put in a Freedom of Information request that finally was answered, and I discovered that, or was told by Hydro, so these are all Hydro's figures, that as of January 1 of this year, nearly 70,000 smart meters were still being read manually, and as of September 1, nearly 50,000 are still being read manually. These are smart meters that are fully functional, except the grid is not up yet. So these smart meters are being read manually, and those people are not being charged anything additional. The very same service that is being provided to those of us with analogs and legacy meters, but we're being charged $32.40. This is against the Utilities Commission Act. The Utilities Commission Act says very clearly that people are to be charged the same thing for the same service. And I wrote to the BC Utilities Commission complaining about this, and they said there's nothing they can do about it because it's a smart meter program. I wrote to Bill Bennett months ago asking him to justify this discriminatory practice. I've written him several letters. I've copied many MLAs, including John Horgan, Adrian Dix, Christy Clark, not one single response.
Well, that's pretty disappointing considering that this affects everybody in the province. Also, another news release from the coalition sent to me said in Quebec they had a ruling about people who want to keep analog meters, and they're going to charge a whole $5 to read the meter. Why
That's
such
right.
a discrepancy? $32.40 in BC and $5 in Quebec. Are they using different dollars there?
I just think that the people in Quebec must be a heck of a lot more efficient. What can I say? But you know what? The people in Quebec are still fighting that $5. They're saying it's discriminatory. Why should they have to pay not to be put in danger? Why should they have to pay extortion not to have something that can catch fire put on their home? The thing is, this is something, first of all, reading our meters is already included in our rates. We had meter readers for years when these rates were established. But I think that, first of all, Bill Bennett in his directive said distinctly that the legacy fees, the fees, would be for the additional services. Tell me, what additional services? There are no additional services that are being performed. Therefore, we should not be charged. There is absolutely no justification for this except the fact that they want to hit the people hardest who are the most vulnerable. Those who are sick, those who have small families, young families, those who are elderly and on fixed incomes are the most vulnerable to both the radio frequency radiation and to fires. Imagine if a fire hits your home and you've got a bunch of children you have to round up. Imagine if a fire hits your home and you're elderly and you have to take some time to get out of your bed. These people are the most vulnerable. So they are being hit the hardest if they want to protect their homes.
Sharon, your organization also pointed out that Oregon and Saskatchewan have taken measures after fires were reported connected to smart meters, yet in BC, more smart meter fires have been reported than both those jurisdictions.
That's correct. Absolutely correct.
How can that happen?
If you've looked at my fire report, which obviously you have, despite the fact that BC Hydro and Bill Bennett say that there have been no fires or failures, when I did a Freedom of Information request in BC Hydro, I got a list with more than 26 meter failures. When I went to the BC Safety Authority, I looked at their 2012 summary, and they admit at least 10 smart meter fires. So this is happening. In Saskatchewan, they stopped the program after 8 failures. No fires, just failures. In Oregon, they had 12 failures and 1 fire, and they stopped it. In Florida, they stopped it in a couple of places where they've had some fires and failures. How many people have to die here before our government does something? The government here is still denying it, despite the fact they've got all this information from their departments. And it is murder, Jim, trying to get this information, because there is no coding for smart meter fires at the fire commissioner. And in fact, what is even scarier, the fire commissioner is not getting fire reports as is required by law. Under the Fire Act, the fire commissioner is supposed to receive a report from the fire department's inspector within 3 working days after the fire. I've requested reports more than 2 years after major fire, and the fire commissioner doesn't have it. And when I've asked him why, they say, well, if we don't know the fire has occurred, how can we possibly go after the report? When I've asked at the fire departments why the reports haven't been submitted, I was told that their budgets have been cut so badly by the Liberal government that they don't have the money to file reports. They're only paid $13 per report. That's not worth their time. And fire inspectors for the department have said that they don't have time to do a forensic investigation to get down to the bottom of the cause of the fire. As soon as they see that there's something electrical involved, they say electrical and they close their file and they send it in. No one is looking out for us. I went to the BC Safety Authority. They're supposed to get a report on anything electrical. They aren't getting reports either. I've told them about incidents that I know that they didn't have a record of. I asked them, what do they do? Because they sent me information on several fires in 2012. I think it was 10. Of course, there are a lot of them for which they have no clue. They say undetermined, and many of them say arcing, mechanical, the mechanical problem with the distribution equipment, which could mean smart meters. I don't know. But I said, when you find that there's a problem, a fire caused by a smart meter, do you report it to anybody? And they say no. And I said, why don't you report it to the fire commissioner? Well, we assume the fire commissioner gets the report, which is wrong. I said, do you report it to the BC Utilities Commission? And they say, no. We assume the BC Utilities Commission gets a report, which they don't. I asked. They don't. So I said, who else do you report it to? And the BC Safety Authority said, in many instances, they have some authority over BC Hydro, but with regard to the smart meter program, they've been told to butt out 100%. Nobody is looking after us, Jim. And the NDP should be standing up for these things. The billings, the discriminatory fees that are hitting the middle class and the young families the hardest, and the fires, these are issues that the NDP stand for. Why are they being so quiet? I don't understand. We're in between elections. They can't possibly hope or fear that they're going to lose a vote. I don't understand, Jim.
We'll have more with Sharon Noble right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back to the Goddard Report. We're speaking to Sharon Noble, director of the Coalition to Stop Smart Meters in BC. Sharon, you also brought up an interesting concern about microwave radiation, and when we say radiation, we mean it in the worst way, about the U.S. Navy conducting electronic warfare exercises right off our coast.
That's correct. In fact, I just learned about it last week. I think it was on the 8th of October, when it's been talked about for quite some time, and the U.S. Navy didn't bother to tell anybody over on the Olympic Peninsula where this is going to take place. And when the public found out about it, they screamed bloody murder, and they had to open an investigation and a period for some public comments. The public comment period was initially closing October 10th, but because of the flood of letters, many of which came from British Columbia, the comment period is still open until October 30th, so I hope people will take the opportunity to make a comment. What is happening is that the U.S. Navy plans on putting multiple transmitters on mountains along the Olympic Peninsula coast that will be sending off massive amounts of radiation, radio frequency and microwave radiation. They want to test to find out how to cut off their enemies' communication, navigation, and any sort of military communications. They're going to be using radio frequency radiation to contact airplanes, ships, we don't know what all. And this is going to start next September. And it's going to be permanent. They are putting permanent transmitters to conduct warfare training with microwave radiation, and it's going to have the potential to reach into our space, into our areas along the islands of British Columbia.
Now, is this an absolute defense position, or is this just an experiment? Are we just going to be guinea pigs here without any say?
Seems so. I have asked the government, both the federal and the provincial government, if they knew about it, and if they did, what did they say, and if they didn't, what are they going to do? And I haven't received a response yet. I wrote to them on the 8th, last Wednesday, when I first heard about it, and I said, what is going on here? And no one has even been concerned enough to even respond. I don't understand how they can be possibly using microwave radiation devices, strong transmitters, in an area that's going to be affecting not only us, but the wildlife. This has the potential to do major damage to marine animals and to birds, everything around here that we cherish. And we have no say. The people in the Souk area and East Souk are only 8 to 10 miles away from where these transmitters are going to be. Where I live, I can see them from my home. I'm probably about 20 miles away, and I'm up on top of a mountain, so I can see that far. Victoria is only about 24 miles away. We are very, very vulnerable, and I think this is something that people need to know about. They should be Googling and look at U.S. Navy warfare, Olympic Peninsula, and get all the information.
Well, I remember back in the 70s, the Russians had a standing radio wave. NATO called it the woodpecker because it would go tick, tick, tick. And it would build what they called electronic vortices over the east coast of Canada, some of them so strong they dug craters in the ground.
Oh, my gosh.
So what are they doing here? I mean, this one would be a whole lot closer than Russia.
We don't know. We don't know what they're going to be doing, of course, because it's top secret. And it's going to be, it's very near, the Port Angeles area, and it's along the west coast. They're going to have quite a few transmitters. I can't remember. I think it's something like 14 transmitters that are permanent, and they're also going to have ones that are on trucks that are going to be mobile, so they'll be moving around all the time. The information is very difficult to get. If you Google it and get into the information, there are a couple of Navy websites that are supposed to have information. I couldn't get in them. I went in them and I was told that the access was denied.
And of course, too, I want to point out too about the new appliances. They have a chip in them that would allow somebody to turn your appliances on and off. And I was just thinking if they were hacked, they could turn your oven up to 500 and leave it there until your house burnt down.
They can do all sorts of things. The Zigbee chip is terribly invasive. And one of the things that Hydro is going to be allowed to do once the Zigbee chip is activated is to be able to turn your power on and off. They have a remote disconnect switch as well. This is one of the things in the smart meter that is so very dangerous. In Florida, they've attributed the fires to the remote disconnect switch, because if it has any sort of a gap in it, there's a spark, it can arc. Our engineers who have looked at it and who are writing a technical report that will be out within the next few days, I'm hoping, have identified many design flaws, and one of them is this remote disconnect switch. And Hydro demanded, this is one of the design features that they insisted upon having, so that they can disconnect your electricity if they believe you're using too much. If corporations need it, they can turn it down. Or if you haven't paid your bills, they can turn your power off remotely. Or if you move, they can turn your power off. They also tell firefighters that they can turn the electricity off in case there's a fire, so that the firefighters can go in and shut off, can fight the fire. Well, the firefighters are told, and Len Garris is not telling them, that this is not a surefire thing, no pun intended. If Hydro turns it off, or says they turned it off, it may not have functioned. If there's too large a space, it's not functioning. And these firefighters going in believing that the electricity's been turned off could be electrocuted.
So more and more
a lot of bad things about these smart meters, Jim.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and more are being discovered every day. And of course, we've had research come in from Europe where, they've told people turn these things off, that they could be putting out dangerous amounts of radiation. You don't know what they're doing to you. And here, governments don't seem to care.
Yep. It's happening all over the place, Jim, and it just doesn't end. It doesn't end with radio frequency radiation from smart meters. It's happening in schools. This government knows that Wi-Fi is dangerous, but yet they're insisting that Wi-Fi be put into schools, where children are sitting there in front of these very, very strong modems for hours each day, where teachers who may be pregnant are working with them. It is very, very dangerous, and nobody's listening to us, Jim.
And of course now and I was going to say too, and now the new cars have radar sets that tell you, there might be a collision or there's somebody in your blind spot, and they're spraying out microwaves as well.
Well, it's not only that. They've got Bluetooth and cell phone connections and everything else. The cars are run by computers now. They're very, very high in RF emitters, and you're sitting in a metal box. You're in a Faraday cage, so you're getting it reflected off all of the hard surfaces as well. And nobody's telling anybody anything.
Wow, so you can cook your dinner, just have it sit on the seat next to you on the way home, and it'll be microwaved.
That's just about it. You're not far off.
Yeah. Well, Sharon,
You have to pay extra, too, to not have it in your car.
Oh, you'd think it'd be the other way around. But what I find interesting is some of these, if you're wandering out of your lane, the car will automatically guide you back in. But what happens if you're in an area where they've just had new construction, for example? There's the old white lines on the road, the new white lines, and perhaps some tar spilled there. I've seen those white lines, especially in the rain, lead you right into a concrete wall if you followed them.
Well,
So
what if there's a child or an animal in the way and you're trying to avoid it?
Sharon, please keep us up to date on anything new with these issues.
I will. The technical report should be out within the next few days, and as soon as it's released, Jim, I'd like to speak with you about it.
You bet. What's your website?
It is www.stopsmartmetersbc.com and www.citizensforsafetechnology.org.
Thank you very much for speaking with us, Sharon.
You're very welcome, Jim. Thank you.
My guest has been Sharon Noble, Director of the Coalition to Stop Smart Meters in BC. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. You can find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. We're also up on YouTube. Comments about the show can be sent to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.